and asbestos disease victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX for a free consultation or visit us online at gpwlaw.com.
Local news, local topics, local conversation. You're listening to AM Beaver County on 95.7 FM, 99.3 FM, 1230 WBVP, and 1460 WMBA. Presented by St. Barnabas and streaming live at beavercountyradio.com.
And we're back on this Wednesday morning edition of AM Beaver County, and been hearing all morning about the high heat and the humidity, and the heat index values going up to 100. And while it's rough for us as human beings, it can be even rougher for animals. And we're here today with Tristan Wenzig. He is a humane officer with the Beaver County Humane Society. First of all, Tristan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming in. And how many times a day, because we were sort of talking about this before we got started, how many times a day do you get complaints about animals and heat during this time of year?
Usually whenever it starts getting into the 80s, we get about anywhere from 5 to 10 calls average on a day about animals being in heat.
That's still quite a bit. I mean, it may not be all, 5 to 10 animals in the grand scheme of things may not be a lot, but that's still a lot of animals to be dealing with in the heat, especially on a daily basis.
Yeah, it is. And whenever you only have a department of 2 officers, it's really hard to get to all those calls, especially when you're patrolling the entire county.
So whenever you do go on a call, well, what's the process that takes place whenever, there's a complaint of, animals being in heat?
Usually we just dispatch one of us out, one of the officers, go assess the situation and determine if the animals have proper shelter, food, and water in these heat conditions.
And what are the protocols if they do or if they don't?
So basically having a shelter for the animal that is 3-sided with a roof. They can escape the elements of the heat, some form of shade for them to be in, and having food and water if they're going to be outside, especially if they're tethered. And a dog is not supposed to be tethered in the weather conditions anywhere from below 32 degrees or above 90 degrees for longer than 30 minutes. And if they are, and they don't have access to that food and water and shelter, then they can be charged.
Right. And at that point, what charges do the Humane Society file with those who have committed the violation?
Typically, that would be a summary offense, which is a non-traffic citation. It's kind of almost like a speeding ticket for neglect of an animal, for not having proper shelter.
Right.
Now, if it's beyond that, where it's causing a dog serious bodily injury or death, that can go up to a misdemeanor or a felony charge.
Oh, wow. So it could be considered a misdemeanor or felony if the dog in that particular case is, under such duress that they're on, basically a life support situation.
That's correct. And prior to 1983, they never had felony charges for animal cruelty. It was only up to a misdemeanor.
Mm. So again, anybody who commits, that kind of infraction is, subject to felony, which is, a pretty heavy situation for anyone to deal with. So again, for those who, have, and the thing too with Libre's law, that we were also talking about that I didn't even know before we started was it only applies to dogs.
That's correct. The law only specifies dogs. It does not specify other animals.
Why do you think that is?
Well, the actual Libre's law came from a dog, a Boston Terrier named Libre, and a bunch of animal activists rescued this dog in the condition that it was in. So they pushed for it to be passed by legislation. And it was approximately 5 years ago where they actually passed Libre's law. So until they can start looking into the other animals and, discuss this in the judicial system, then it's going to kind of go just according to dogs right now.
Right. Which is, and it's something to consider because, it's not just dogs that have to deal with the chaotic heat on an everyday basis. Any animal that's out there, whether it be, cats or, other types of animals, they'll suffer the heat just like we do.
Exactly. And if it does come down to it where there's an animal that is suffering from heat, and we do take it to a local veterinarian clinic or emergency vet, and they do discuss that it's heat stroke, then we could discuss about possible charges being filed.
Now, I was going to ask, too, because you were sort of answering the next question I was going to have, which is, obviously we know about we know now about the possible offenses that can be charged against those who own pets and are, violating Libre's law. What about the animals themselves? I mean, because we know that, some animals may be taken in for heat stroke, determine how bad things are. If an animal is out there against a violation, but they're not quite in ultimate danger, what does the Humane Society do? Do they just leave things as they are and cite a warning, or do they take the animals in anyway?
So there's two different circumstances here. If there's exigent circumstances where we think the dog, we'll use the case that we just had last week with the Siberian Husky that passed away. We would have taken that dog into our custody and taken it to a local emergency vet, but the individual was dealing with the Baden police officer, and he told her to take it to a vet. So that's one situation where if we think the dog is dying in front of us, we would take the dog and charge the person and get the dog the vet care that it needs immediately. Now, if we don't think that it's an exigent circumstance, then we will go ahead and talk with the DA and determine if a search warrant's necessary in this part and go from there.
So in the case of a non-emergency, it would basically come down to consulting the DA and deciding if further action should be taken as opposed to taking further action right on the spot.
That's correct.
Understood. We're talking with Tristan Wenzig. He is a humane officer from the Beaver County Humane Society. And Tristan, you mentioned that, it's an operation of 2 officers in this position. And again, I can imagine with the amount of calls per day, it's probably pretty heavy to just carry the workload between 2 people.
Yeah, that's correct. And then I have the next 4 days off, so my other officer is going to be hating me the next few days. So,
well, for those who may be listening and thinking, it's a terrible thing, what those animals have to go through. What does it take to become a humane officer?
Actually, it's not really extensive to become a humane officer. You go through a 2-week kind of basic training through a school that is an ex-state police officer. She runs this school. And once you pass that 2-week basic training, you can become a humane officer. Do I think it should be longer? Probably. Because a lot of the humane officers throughout the state don't really have any law enforcement background, and emotions take part of their actions. So in the law enforcement field, you got to be able to control your emotions when you're dealing with people. And you see a lot of these humane officers are animal activists and lovers. And I'm not saying that I'm not.
Right.
It's just being able to control your emotions is a big part of this job, especially dealing with animals. There's
still an element of civility that comes with it that doesn't necessarily get discovered too much.
Exactly.
Right, and that's understandable because you don't want to, as bad as the situation may be when it comes to dealing with officers and dealing with people who are violating these laws that leave their pets outdoors, whether it be in the heat or in the cold, and I appreciate you bringing that up too because it does apply to the winter as well, that you still have to be civil about it. You don't want to make a situation even more chaotic. It's just like it would be with a human arrest.
Yeah.
If emotions run high, bad things could happen. So
you got to be able to have some compassion in this job for a human being too, because you don't know anybody's situation. Everybody has a story to their life, and you don't know what's going on in that person's life currently. So maybe they were thinking they were doing something good and it just got out of hand, and maybe they just need a little help.
Yes. And again, the empathy of a situation need not necessarily override the law, but it has to work in tandem with the law and in particular law enforcement when it comes to these situations. We're going to continue the conversation about this on the other side of this break. We're talking with Tristan Wenzig from the Beaver County Humane Society, and we're doing it here on AM Beaver County. We'll be right back.
Computers and internet searches can be very helpful for discovering information, but not always when it comes to researching medical conditions and finding help. Dale Reckless from MRS Physical Therapy recently discussed this topic in a radio interview.
A lot of patients come in and they say, well, I Googled this and it didn't really help. Well, I understand, we Google things and we want to get information, but Google's not going to assess you personally. Google's going to give you an overall possibility of what could be going on with you, but you really need the eyes of the professional and the hands-on, the professional like what we have at MRS Physical Therapy to steer you in the right direction for what exercises should help you out. And then you're going to be getting the hands-on skills that we provide to help work on your soft tissue, to help relax the muscles, to help make it feel better.
If you need physical therapy for any reason, choose the place that your friends and neighbors do. MRS Physical Therapy in Bridgewater and Cranberry Physical Therapy in Cranberry. Visit mrsphysicaltherapy.com.
Tune in every Saturday morning at 8:30 a.m. for another insightful edition of Living Well, a special segment on Beaver County Radio designed to help you enjoy the best, most fulfilling, and healthiest life possible. Hosted by Dr. Joseph Maroon and Jeff Boast, and presented by St. Barnabas. Living Well, Saturday mornings at 8:30, right here on Beaver County Radio, WBVP Beaver Falls, WMBA Ambridge, along with 99.3 FM and 95.7 FM.
Highmark Blue Cross, Blue Shield, and Allegheny Health Network are pleased to present a new show on Beaver County Radio called Heroes. Tune in every Saturday at 10 and Sunday at 12:30 for Heroes, a wonderful half-hour segment hosted by Jim Roddy that profiles many of the local heroes in this community. Click highmark.com for more information and then tune in for Heroes this Saturday at 10 and again Sunday at 12:30 on WBVP, WMBA, and 99.3 FM.
The views and opinions expressed on WBVP and WMBA are those of the participants and hosts. They are not necessarily the viewpoint of WBVP and WMBA, its staff, management, and advertisers. Thank you for listening to WBVP and WMBA.
And we're back on AM Beaver County on this Wednesday morning. We're talking with Tristan Wenzig. He is a humane officer with the Beaver County Humane Society. And Tristan, we're talking about dealing with animals in heat as far as what the process is to bring in animals or to bring in those who have violated the law. As far as the preventative measures of that, let's start with the pet owners themselves. How can pet owners, some of them may be first time, some of them may be first time owners of dogs, how can they find out what, the proper methods of, if the dog is out in heat too long, if the dog is having a heat stroke, how can they tell?
Oh, if they think that their dog is having heat stroke, signs to look at are lethargic, panting heavily, vomiting, the dog looking disoriented. Make sure if you see signs of that, make sure you get wet washcloths, like nice cold washcloths. Put it on the ground, put it on their paws. Try to start cooling them down. And if that's not helping, I would recommend calling 911 or an emergency vet clinic right away.
So 911 can even be a service to situations like that as well, where animals may be suffering from heat stroke.
If there's nothing available if the humane officers are not available which it's unfortunate to say we're not in the office all the time,
right.
So we can't hear our messages or answer the phone constantly. I would recommend if you're scared not knowing what to do, call 911. And see if they can help you walk you through it. And if you don't want to call 911, call an emergency veterinarian.
Right. Gotcha. Now, even going sort of further back, before it gets to that point, what are some methods or what are some sort of regular routines that pet owners or dog owners can use in order to prevent even getting to that point as far as, time limits, water distribution, stuff like that?
Well, everything is answered in the palm of our hands nowadays. Cell phones are a key to living these days. So all you have to do is type in Google, Pennsylvania animal cruelty statutes, and it'll tell you exactly what the law is. It'll tell you how long the animal is allowed to be out there and what proper methods you need to use to keep this animal safe. So just having a shady area, shelter for the animal to escape the heat. And it's not just for heat, it's for inclement weather also. So if a dog does not have shelter when it's pouring down rain, that's not sufficient either. So,
true. That's a good point. That's a good point.
So,
because
you got to give them something to stay dry to escape that element, because if their body, you think about it, their fur is soaking wet, and we'll say the temperature's 35 degrees. That 32 degrees hasn't kicked in yet, where we can enforce that neglect of an animal, but the dog's body, their body temperature could be a lot colder because they're soaking wet.
That's a good point.
They could actually freeze, so they can start being hypothermic. So we want to watch for that too. But yeah, you can look everything up on Google. Just making sure you have proper food and water out there, and check on the animal. If you know it's going to be hot, check on the animal every 15, 20 minutes. I know when I have 3 German Shepherds and they love to go outside and they don't like to come in. But guess what? I have to make sure that they're okay because they're a thick fur. They have a thicker coat, and I got to make sure they have water and stuff in a shaded area to go run around and play.
Exactly. It's basically, again, when you're taking care of a pet, you're taking care of a living being. So, take care of them just as you would any other living being. May not speak the same language as you, if any language at all, but, it still needs food, water, and shelter, and to be checked on and, be taken care of. Now, if a citizen were to see something that they think is suspicious, what are the signs that they would follow? Because, again, we were talking last second about, emotions running high and, sort of making these knee-jerk reactions. What can people look out for before they make such a knee-jerk reaction? Maybe thinking, okay, maybe this animal isn't quite there, or maybe there's signs of it. Maybe I should go further with this. Where's the line there?
Well, I would say if a person is concerned about the animal, I would recommend them waiting 30 minutes to see if somebody's even actually taking care of this animal or checking on this animal. We'll just specify dogs because we're talking about Libre's law for just dogs. So if the dog is outside in these heat conditions, whenever it's over 90 degrees, I would say, hey, at least look at the dog, watch the dog, see if it stays outside for 30 minutes. If it's not, then somebody's caring for this animal. But then again, I would want you to call me so that way I can educate you too on what the proper protocols are and how we would assess the situation. I don't want it to wait too late before we get a phone call, and by the time we get there, it might be too late. So I would recommend anybody, if they are concerned at any point in time, to call our office. And if you can't get a hold of us and you think the situation's a dire need, call 911.
Okay, understood. Because, again, we've been talking about the heat being what it is, and the amount, because I take it that with the heat stroke being what it is, especially on a day like today where the heat index could go up to 100, that the time between something might be wrong and something is wrong is a lot shorter than usual. Yeah,
and the call in Baden last week was, it might have been prevented if somebody would have called a little bit earlier.
Wow, that is rough. That is rough. To even envision, knowing that it could have been held a little bit earlier, done a little bit earlier, things might have been a little bit better. But you mentioned, Googling facts about, heat prevention or, caring for your animals and, time limits and distribution limits. Is there a way as far as, looking up, details from the Beaver County Humane Society as far as how to get hold of you guys about that kind of information?
Yeah, you could go to the beavercountyhumanesociety.org and you can look up information on the Humane Investigations Department and Animal Control Office, and it will give you our phone number, how to get a hold of us, and there's also a tip email, so you can email us tips. You don't have to just call our office. We do emails also.
So if someone wanted to email something in a situation where they may think something's up, then they can email you and go that way too.
Exactly.
Very good. All right. Well, Tristan, I appreciate you coming in this morning to talk about Libre's law a little bit. It's a kind of a dire situation sometimes, but at the same time, it's good that we have these conversations that, push this, idea of, animal care and proper care. And best of luck on your travels, because I know you're going to be out of town for a few days. Yep. And best of luck to the rest of your department while you're gone. And again, you're welcome to come back anytime they in Beaver County to talk about stuff like this.
Awesome, Matt. I appreciate you having us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Coming up next, following news on AM Beaver County, it is Teleforum. Eddie Crow in the wings waiting to get things started. And, of course, you can talk to him at 724-843-1888 and 724-774-1888. Don't forget, we're going to be out in House Corner from 1 until 3 today. Stop by and say hi and spin the prize wheel, courtesy of us here at Beaver County Radio. It's amazing just how